never been so deep in the trenches. I think it's a crazy, idiotic journey trying to set up my own multimedia IP franchise. I've been pulling all-nighters literally on a daily basis. I'd love to just finish the story. That's the number one goal here.
Marko Djurdjevic, an illustrator and concept artist, best known for his ultra-realistic comic work with Marvel.
I grew up in a family that didn't even have books at home. I was always drawn to the idea of illustrating. You can entertain yourself for hours with it. Basically built my entire career around the one hobby that I had as a child. I really want to prove to myself that I'm capable of doing it all. I can't believe I did all this in the last 16 months.
Hey buddy, how are you?
Very good, thank you.
I was going to say, we were chatting just before we hit record, and firstly, thank you very much for making the time. I know that it's very busy for you at the moment, but I very much appreciate it.
Incredibly busy. It's been probably the busiest I've ever been. I've never been so deep in the trenches, and I've never had to slog through so much material at the same time. It's absolutely idiotic. I've been pulling all-nighters literally on a daily basis, even though I go to sleep at 10 o'clock, but it feels all-nighters because it's 16 hours a day of work.
Before we dive in, for anybody that may not have come across your work, let's start with a quick who you are, what you do, and why.
My name is Marko Djurdjevic. I run a company called SIXMOREVODKA out of Berlin. I've been a 30-year veteran in the industry of entertainment. I've been pretty much involved with hundreds of video games and hundreds of comic book covers and occasionally movies. I do concept art for a living. I service clients, make them happy, make sure their franchises look great, and they make $1 billion on the side with my art, and then I get a wet t-shirt in the end. I can call myself a happy camper because I'm listed in the credits somewhere. And as an aside, I just started a crazy, idiotic journey trying to set up my own multimedia IP franchise with all the experience that I've gathered over the last 30 years, and kind of, running in circles and trying to survive this adventure in some capacity or another.
We will touch upon that because obviously the work, coming up to the Kickstarter date of 26th, I think. So we're pretty close to it. But before we kind of go into that, I want to kind of touch upon obviously your inspirations and influences. What got you into where you are today, and what your cultural palette says about you, and what you're drawn to and why.
I mean, this is kind of a funny story. Like my background is not artistic at all. I grew up in a family that didn't even have books at home, and I was always drawn to the idea of drawing and illustrating because it was something that was extremely cheap. You only need paper and a pencil. You can entertain yourself for hours with it when you don't have toys to play with. And so it became a habit to just draw and control the worlds that I was drawing, because you're basically a director from childhood forward. And I was always impressed by stories. Stories always rang a certain bell with me that inspired me to put them onto paper and interpret them somehow. And that skill kind of grew over the years to the point where I was able to land my first job at the age of 17, become a full-time illustrator off of it, and basically built my entire career around the one hobby that I had as a child that I honed until the skills were good enough for it to be turned into money. And this is pretty much the story where it comes from. And the inspirations, the things that got me started in the first place were children's cartoons of the 80s, He-Man, Thundercats, Transformers, the stuff we grew up in the early 80s, but also the movies of that time. I remember my favorite movie throughout my entire childhood, all the way up till today, is The Last Unicorn. I watched it when I was 6 years old, and I think I've rewatched it at least 30, 40 times by now. And it still holds up. It's still my favorite piece of animation, my favorite piece of storytelling in animation. And that was the first contact with art as a storytelling medium that I can clearly remember, that stuck with me, that kind of set the path forward.
What specifically drew you to that then?
I think the story holds up until today. I think it's a very, very tragic tale about, self-discovery and the inability to feel guilt. There's a lot of meta going on in that story in particular. A lot of weird and broken characters that are kind of banding together all in hopes of solving a riddle about their own existence. The conclusion is just not a happy end. Average Disney movie. It leaves a lot of questions out in the open and a lot of things are unanswered. And that's what I find magical about that thing until today. And I really love the character design of that movie. That character design is so unique and so special compared to a lot of the animation that was coming out from Disney or other studios at the time, and even later on.
What's your view on storytelling as a whole at the moment? Because both 80s kids, so we're kind of talking, when you talk about He-Man and Thundercats and stuff, that's very much in my gaze. When I was kind of growing up, it was the things that I really were drawn to. But obviously, He-Man's coming out later this year. That's intriguing. But yeah, your view on storytelling currently and I guess the depth of storytelling and the availability of narratives that maybe me and you are personally drawn to versus what would kind of be put forth by a lot of larger studios at this present point in time. It's a bit different, I guess.
Well, this is a longer conversation. I think one that could drag out for the whole night. But I do think that we're lacking a certain seriousness in the way we present stories nowadays. I feel the directors are always visible in the storytelling, and there has been a notion of people just aping Joss Whedon's Avengers in every new movie that comes out. And there's a self-deprecating humor to the way characters are being presented today, where I feel the stories are just detouring. They're going away from being stories to being, palatable marketing pieces for an audience that wants to hear the director make jokes about the franchise that he's directing. And I just find that sad because there was a time, and this is really just talking about myself. I love making fun of myself. I take myself not seriously at all, but I take my art serious, and I do appreciate people taking their art serious when they're trying to present it to an audience and not coating it with dumb humor and puns and trying to, put a joke into every other sequence just to keep the audience engaged. And this kind of seriousness towards presenting, a movie or a story in the most authentic way is kind of lost, I would say. So I've not been attracted to movies in the last decade at all. They just all feel very samey.
I read early on when I was kind of doing a little bit of background, and obviously a big thanks goes to a previous guest of the show, Russell Biner, for putting this together. Yeah, I was intrigued as to, there was a story I read about you about when you were kind of 11, you were drawn towards the Bern Hogarth dynamic autonomy. So I was wanting to know what grabbed you about that specific book and kind of how that influences the work that you do today.
All the way up till today, I was never a Bridgman fan when it comes to anatomy or any of the other big anatomy teacher books out there, because what Hogarth does is, he's very analytical and almost engineering in a sense. He presents you with an almost technocratic view of the body and like just presents volume and space, and you learn what the mechanics are rather than learning how to draw pretty faces or pretty pictures or shade in a nice way. And I think what this approach helped me with was use it as a guideline or as a foundation to construct on top of and build my own visual language off of the material that I had in front of me and that I learned from when I was 11. And I was lucky enough to come across that book because I didn't have any teacher or anybody in my life that could bring me closer to what I wanted to accomplish as an artist. And it was the very first book that I had on artistic foundation, and I held it dearly for many years and used it for study.
That kind of leads a little bit into your previous career of Marvel, but looking at where and how you got involved in comic book design. I read somewhere about the redesigning of 18 X-Men characters in 3 days, posting them online, and whilst getting simultaneously attacked and offering a Marvel contract. What was that actually like within that week, and what did it teach you about just bravery, putting your creative work out there?
It was a perfect storm in terms of, where my life was at that moment. I was visiting a friend in Germany. I was on vacation. I decided to redesign X-Men just because I was bored. We didn't have anything to do. He was also a big Marvel comic fan. He drew something on the side. He later also became a Marvel artist later on. But I drew these characters, posted them online. The post instantly got traction. It went viral, got all the way over to Marvel. Marvel sent their talent scouts after me. And just as Marvel approached me to start working for them, I had also met my wife, and I had to make a decision to move back to Europe, which meant leaving my job behind that I had in San Francisco, which was a job that I really loved. and it gave me a bunch of security, but I also loved my wife and I wanted to be with her. And so the Marvel job just fell right into my lap at that very moment and allowed me to, quit my job in San Francisco, move back to Europe, but still be employed somehow, somewhere, have steady income. And I think after 2, 3 covers that I did with them, they offered me an exclusive deal, which, basically kickstarted my entire career over at Marvel and allowed me to, be both a married man and also have some steady type of income and a career in the making.
At the time, when you were one of the most in-demand cover artists in and around comics, and the volume that you're producing, like 3 to 5 covers a month of some of the
There were
biggest characters in the
more.
world.
There were months where I had 10 covers on the rack. So Marvel would put out 100 comic books in a month, and 10 of those, so 10% of the covers were mine, which was absolutely ludicrous. I think in the first year I painted 82 covers for them. And the reason why I think my career started getting traction was because I was really good at keeping my deadlines. And they would send me an assignment in the evening, and the next day in the morning I would do the sketch, send it over. They would get the sketch by the time they wake up. They would approve it, and then I would sit there, and within a period of 8 hours, I would bang the cover out, give it over to them so they could publish it. And so they just kept on feeding me. I was young. I had all the fire in the world. I was 27 years old, and I just really wanted to succeed, and I wanted to make sure that I'm doing this right and not fucking it up. And so it was a good synergy between the Marvel office and me. And they also really soon realized that they were selling more books every time they were putting me on the cover. And so they started putting me on books that were close to cancellation because their sales numbers had dropped. And then with a cover of mine, it would be able to pivot that back and get the sales numbers back up and keep the publication of a title alive artificially for a little bit longer, for another 6 issues, or to finish or complete a story arc, which was a really nice way of, like saving certain titles. I really like that.
How long were you there for, and what were your favorite covers that you've done, if you can recall?
I was with them for 6 years, and I think the favorite ones were all the no-name titles that they gave me. Covers where there was, almost no competition in the field, where none of the great ones had ever really touched those characters. And I was able to, bring some charm and life into almost abandoned D-listers and C-listers, which I always had a soft spot for. I really like tackling those the most. And I think the most successful ones were the early Blade covers. I really liked my run on Daredevil because it was really long. It was 23 consecutive issues that I did, 2.5 years of work without a break on that particular title. And that really gave me a lot of room to experiment. And often the covers that were the most fun were when you're on really good terms with an editor, when the editor leaves you a lot of room to be experimental, when they don't have a preconceived idea of what the cover is supposed to be, but they trust you as the artist and let you go crazy. And those were the highlights for sure.
What was it like walking away at that kind of...
It wasn't really walking away. It was more of a transition, because at the time that I was working at Marvel, my career was really lifting up, and Marvel was introducing me to a bunch of video game studios that were licensing Marvel characters at the time to help them as a concept artist on the side, because I was also doing concept art for Marvel Comics itself, and that concept art was also feeding the early Marvel Cinematic Universe. So there was a whole economy behind the scenes outside of just doing covers that I was being introduced to. And so the demand was rising, and as the demand was rising, I was realizing, okay, I can't do all of this alone anymore. And this is around the pivoting point 2010, where I decided, okay, I need to open up a studio. I need to hire people to help me out, because there's just too much stuff that is being thrown at me, and I would be stupid to say no to all these opportunities when I can also, at the same time, just try to build up a company that can handle parts of the production. And I'm more in a managerial function and oversee parts of those assignments that are coming in. And so basically I transitioned out from the exclusivity with Marvel into opening up a studio that was servicing clients that were having Marvel licenses, pretty much. So I never really got untangled from Marvel in that sense. So the characters kept following. It was just the clients that were changing.
What about the conception of six more vodkas, and how did that come about? I've heard it came about in a bar of
Yeah. So the name is really old. It is going back to 2004 when I met my two best friends at the time in a bar in Amsterdam. And the only thing that they remembered, all three of us remembered the next day, was that I kept ordering six more vodka shots at the bar, double shots for each of the three of us. And we had the worst hangover of our lives the next day, and we could barely stand and walk. And it became such a meme between the three of us that became my nickname pretty much. And then I thought to myself, if I ever do something with my life, it needs to be called that, because this is the dumbest name that one can come up with. And it's what I wanna have as my branding. Because as I said, I can't take myself very serious in work and production anyway. And so I felt it kind of fitting.
When it comes to some of the work that you've done as well, obviously you've worked on the likes of League of Legends, you've done loads of work for Riot. What draws your gaze at that point in regards to inspiration? Because often, most creative works is like a basic brief, but then there's a lot of freedom of expression about how you want to interpret that. Where does your mind go in amongst that kind of, in that moment?
It really depends on how familiar you are with the franchise. It's very easy to draw Marvel because I grew up with Marvel. So there's always a factor of nostalgia inside of you where you go into your inner child and you remember how you would have wanted to see it or see it be drawn when you were a child, and then building up that connection. When it's a franchise that you're not familiar with, you just have to start loving that franchise in a sense. You just have to start appreciating it, digging into it, trying to build connections with it and understand it. It's, of course, this is one of the major parts, that you cannot get over attached to it because it's somebody else's thing. You cannot ever claim it for yourself. You can only try to work within the confines of what you're given and experiment around the edges, and see how far you can push it. And with Riot, it was a great time, but they came to us at a very crucial moment in time. Riot was really blowing up, and they needed a company to come in and help them out on a more drastic kind of modernization overhaul of everything that they had built up to that point, and that could put that into a pipeline of production and produce a lot of material there. And so we had a very, very good run with them, 7 years of exclusivity, where they really started trusting us early on, even after year one, to just stick to our devices and do the things that we are really good at in isolation and present them directly with the finals. So it was a very good partnership, very good relationship.
And back to the seriousness of the story, because kind of we mentioned it at the beginning. There seems to be two sort of themes emerging at the moment. Some where they kind of just want a happy clappy kind of general throwaway piece of content, and others where there's a bit more depth of meaning in regards to the stories that people want to tell, especially a reflection upon society today. There's a lot more creative outlets and creative opportunities, I feel, to tell deeper, more connected stories to help mirror mirror society in a way that isn't so preachy, but is a form of escapism and a form of intrigue as well. What's drawn your influence in regards to the seriousness, I guess, and the possibilities around storytelling today?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, I do feel that I tend to like stories that are serious just more than the goofy stuff. I've never watched a comedy. Oh, like I
No,
can't. I just can't stand it. I can't handle it. You can't put me in front of a comedy and make me smirk. I just get annoyed as hell. It's
no way.
yeah. It's just I hate premeditated humor. Humor exists in my life only if it's spontaneous, and
Yeah.
I love it when it's spontaneous, when it just happens on the side, and I can shit talk all day and laugh my ass off. But you put me in front of comedy, I just turn sour. I just it doesn't vibe with me, and it feels such a waste of time. And so every time I feel stories try to put a layer of comedy into themselves, I kind of lose interest. It just doesn't jive with me. I don't need that clunky humor and
I'm
yankiness.
more drawn to serious story. However, if you give me a Dumb and Dumber, I'll quite happily watch that because it's just it's stupid, but equally it's
I
funny.
wouldn't be able to stomach it. Like
Oh,
I'd
no,
be
no, no.
and 10 minutes, 10 minutes max.
So what are you drawn to then? What have you really enjoyed watching or consuming?
I mean, really, my last year with movies was 2008. I think that was the last great year of movies, as far as I remember. That was the year There Will Be Blood came out, Assassination of Jesse James by the Coward Robert Ford, No Country for Old.
Yeah.
3 fantastic movies in a row, and it's never been that good again. I kind of left the movie verse in 2008. I have not returned yet. So this is really what it is. That's what I go back to. I watch There Will Be Blood all the time. I've watched that movie so many times, and every time I watch it, I feel, wow, I feel I've never watched this movie. Everything feels so fresh.
Yeah.
It's so captivating. It's so good. It's so well done. It's an absolute brilliant performance by Daniel Day-Lewis. But it's also a directional masterpiece. I just find it incredible that something like that exists.
What about visual inspirations? What we talk about movies, but especially in some of your current projects that you're working on, also the Kickstarter that we're going to get to, is what inspires those?
Well, I draw a lot of inspiration from things that are often not obvious or your first choice. For example, I mean, Orken specifically right now is drawing a lot from cultures that are just generally underrepresented in media, be it Aztecs, Mayas, Inca, Zulu, Indian subcontinent, Polynesia, you name it, which is, you have some outlier material coming out every now and then where, somebody is tackling something, but nobody's really merging those cultures into a grander and more cohesive story, at least visually, I feel. Most fantasy is rotating around the same brownish European mud and chainmail and, stormy skies and Scottish Highlands. And I just get bored of that. I've seen that too many times to be still inspired by it. And I'm looking for other types of inspiration. And then really, I think I do my research thoroughly enough to try to understand what is in front of me, to not just blatantly copy it, but to be inspired by it and then try to create something off of it that is not derivative, but, somehow unique by taking inspiration from this and from that and merging that together into something hopefully new.
I'm interested as well that when you work and operate, obviously a large proportion of your career has been solo, essentially. You're reliant upon your own creativity and outlets and objectives and performance and all that good stuff. But when it comes to, taking a step back and having creative teams around you and people reporting into, I guess, how have you managed that differentiation? Because I know personally, I much prefer working alone than I do in teams, because I have a very specific way of working and how I like to delve deeply into topics. For me, I'm driven, especially in the types of storytelling that I do, I'm driven by emotion. I'm driven by a reflection of culture today. So I'll do a huge amount in regards to intelligence reporting to kind of draw into understanding of what the world is saying right now. And then I'll then look across things, movies, films, music, all of these things inspire me to a point that I then start in my head visualizing what is the type of story that I want to tell. I find it really hard on the other side to kind of articulate that to a
It's not
team.
easy to find people that you can vibe with. It takes forever to dig those people out and to understand if they're really aligned with you or not. And I much prefer it on small scale. Every time it's creator owned, it cannot be more than 3, 4 people at the very core. And then whoever comes in as a freelancer needs to be a freelancer that is such a high professionalist that when he's, onboarded, he instantly gets what the thing is about. I don't think you can do creator owned stuff with large teams and with, democratizing the process, because that just waters it down so quickly, and it turns into such a mush of everybody's favorite idea turned in just to create something that has some weird mass appeal but really doesn't bite, doesn't sting, doesn't have an edge. And I just don't feel attracted to that. So I do agree with you. It needs, at least on the early conceptual stages, it needs to stay yours with a very small group of people in confidence that you can really trust, that understand what your initial vision is and how to best to get there. For example, on Orken, I only have one artist next to me, and he's somebody that wanted to work on that IP for years. And he even applied for that IP specifically. And then he wasn't good enough for a couple of years. And over a period of time of him developing as an artist, I then onboarded him onto the team, and he's now my second in command on the property itself. But that was a long process. It took like 4 years to get in there, and so I'm very, very touchy when it comes to who I bring on board in a situation like this.
But prior to that, like there was Degenesis, I think it was called. I'm intrigued as to that, because if you spend so much time in regards to the level of depth of the storied world that you want to create, I believe it was 2 volumes, and it was incredible. But then, did you not give it away for free? What was the strategic direction, or was it a philosophical one, or what was the approach behind that?
So Degenesis, it was such a complex tabletop RPG that it only appealed to hardcore gamers, people who have all the time in the world to sit there and read through 3,000 pages and soak it all up and really delve into the world. And we were having such troubles for years in the first 4 or 5 years of publishing the book to even find distribution. We never found a distributor that would want to pick it up. The people didn't understand it. People thought it was awkward, too expensive, too overproduced. And so we couldn't get the retailers to pick it up, and we couldn't get the distributors to pick it up. Or the offers that we were getting were such sharky offers that we would lose money on a distribution deal instead of making money on a distribution deal. And so we decided, okay, how can we amp up exposure? Let's go free to play. We give away the PDFs for free. At least, that will get us traction. People will see what we're doing. And then hopefully we can then detour them over to the shop and have them become customers. It actually went really good. It picked up in sales during the first year, but then it completely collapsed in the second because people just got lazy. They got the PDFs for free as they were coming out, and they just didn't feel the urgency to buy when the product was becoming available. And we tried to communicate to the fans, like, guys, putting a new book out every 6 weeks. You're downloading crazy, but you're not buying. There's a huge discrepancy. We can't do this forever. And they're like, yeah, we'll buy. And like we kept on doing that for another 10 months, I think. And then all of a sudden we were seeing a new book coming out. We're getting 80 sales in the shop. And at the same time, we get like 3,000 downloads on the website. And you're like, oh, holy shit, guys, like, come on. Like, if you're that interested in it, gotta pay the creator something. And then I just decided, okay, now it's time to pull the plug. And so I pulled the plug. And I'm not doing this anymore. And suddenly we had the biggest storm of our entire life on our shop. Literally everybody buying the warehouse empty. All books sold within a period of 2.5, 3 months, which was absolutely crazy, but that was pretty much the end of the line. So the experiment failed in and of itself because we could never incentivize people to buy when it was available.
How does that experiment per se, how does it shape the universe that you're building right now? Because you're not just doing 1 or 2 SKUs per se, you did a multiple transmedia universe. So how's it shaped that from the experiences that you've been through, and also the motivations behind the stories you want to tell, and a little bit more about what Orken's about?
Well, with Degenesis, the biggest problem, I think, was the onboarding process. It was so complex, so dense, so thick that most people wouldn't get through the first 50 pages. And back then, I had the design philosophy of wanting to give as much value as I could per product. And I was stuffing the products choke full with material, literally drowning the reader from the get-go to, make it a torture session to even get into the universe. And with Orken, I changed that approach entirely. I just lightened it all up. It's as complex as the previous one, but it's multiple different entry points, very easy to get into. The entire project is basically broken down into much smaller bite-sized assets that you can just consume in a more serialized manner. You get the same bang for your buck, but it's spaced out in a way that it doesn't become so demanding on the read itself. It was very important for me that I lighten the entry points for them, that I find new methods to bring people closer to that universe, because I know the complexity of the story that I'm trying to tell, but I also know now from the experience with Degenesis that I cannot overwhelm people. I used to. I need to do it in a smarter way, in a slower, more transitory type way. People have the time to adapt to that new thing rather than, drowning in information on page 12 and not knowing not knowing how to cope with all the stuff that is being thrown at them. So that's really the approach here, and why I've opted for a multimedia approach, because it allows for people with different tastes to come in to the IP from different angles. Pretty much, somebody that just novels can experience the IP in pure novel format, read it on the train or in bed. Somebody that pictures and needs pictures to excite him about something or make him interested in reading a section will get the illustrated version, which is, getting all the material that is already written in novel format, illustrated in full, big, deluxe spreads where, they can just enjoy the art, and it gives them another entry point. Then the graphic novel side, of course, for people who love comics, they want short format, they want something that is crisp and detailed, but also has pictures. And so I'm exploring all these different entry points to make it easier for people to get into the larger story that I'm trying to tell. But since all of these stories are interconnected and I'm writing all of them, it all makes sense if you read them all. So you're getting your single story, and it feels, oh, this is a one shot. But then if you read everything, you realize it's one moving universe with all kinds of different parts acting at the same time.
Obviously, there's so much that goes into creating transmedia universes, and there has to be a core motivation behind the creator. There has to be a driving force. What's driving you above and beyond just getting something out there? What is the central story that you're hoping to tell? What are you hoping to gain from that? And I'm not talking about monetary. I'm talking about personal.
A lot of things that are motivating me here. First of all, I've done everything in my career that I could have done. There's nothing that excites me anymore. I don't look forward to working on video game X or movie Y. It just doesn't get me going. Everything feels the same when it comes to that. The second thing is, of course, you're never an authority when you're in a service situation. You always have to bend to the rules. And you're working on another person's property, so you're not in charge. And I'm, 3 years away from turning 50, and I don't know how many times I can listen to somebody that is half my age tell me to not do it the way that I'm doing it, but do it differently. There comes a point where you're, okay, I've heard this type of line enough. Maybe it's time for me, to depart a little bit and do my own thing. The next thing that I think that motivates me the strongest is I really want to prove to myself that I'm capable of doing it all. I really think that is something I need to wake up to, a challenge, and a lot of the work that I'm doing is just not challenging enough. It's not, you get a job and it's just the same type of autopilot that you've done for 30 years. The longer you do it, the more proficient you get at it. So you need a different type of challenge to understand what you're capable of and what your true potential is. And that's why I opted for something that would challenge me in all different types of areas. It would challenge me as a writer. It would challenge me as an artist. It would challenge me as a graphic designer, as a product designer, as a manager, as a producer. So I try to merge that all into one big opportunity for myself, so I can basically decide how high is the mountain that I'm wanting to climb. And since I'm constantly obsessed with finding things that keep me entertained, maybe because deep down I'm just bored by the things that I'm surrounded with, I made this one so spectacularly big that I'm surprised that I made it. So it's really something where I wake up to in the morning, I can't believe I did all this shit in the last 16 months. And so that is definitely a motivational factor. Other things that motivate me, for example, my son's reaction to the first novel from the series was absolutely fabulous. He doesn't give a shit for what I do. All of a sudden, he's a fan of something that I've done. And then he came back to me because he wants to study film. And then he came back to me and he broke the novel down into 10 episodes for an animated TV show. And he literally pitched it back to me, and basically sliced my chapters apart and ran some additional add-ons onto how to extend one episode here to fill it up with 45 minutes of content, and how to shorten the other one. And I was, dude, you've never cared for anything that I've done. And all of a sudden, you're really into something. And so those are the defining factors of wanting to stand up in the morning and work on this and staying consistent and disciplined throughout.
There's a lot of unknown as to where we're about to head. You've got the 26th date of the Kickstarter that's not too far away. And what are you hoping for?
This, what people don't understand, they think they want to know what if there's a deeper meaning behind all of this, and really there isn't. There is just the absolute will to make it, to finish it, to have it out of my system. I came up with that story when I was 22 years old, and I started it in 2001. And I gave up halfway through because I felt I was not mature enough as an artist and as a writer to finish the project. Then I tried to reboot it in 2004 and 2005 and 2008. Every time I failed. In 2016, finally, I had the breakthrough moment where I found the right style for it to tell the story visually. But still, in 2016, I wasn't feeling strong enough as an author to carry the thing all by myself. And so it kept on sitting in my desk for such a long time until our mutual friend Russell came over some 7 years ago and saw the thing and asked me, "What is this?" And then I told him and I pitched it to him and he fell in love with it. And he was, "This is the best fucking thing you have. You should finish this." And even then I wasn't feeling it. It literally had to hit me almost 2 years ago where it was, okay, my time is running out. I'm aging. I'm sitting on this thing. I think it's a treasure. I need to treat it with the same respect that I always wanted to treat it. Now that I have all this experience, I can finally put it into action. And that is how all of this started. Now, after 16 months, I'm sitting on 1,400 written pages, edited, design, art directed by me, over 350 illustrations done for the IP itself, with another 200 from other contributors, with a video game in production, with 75 major pitches behind me, 2 heart surgeries. I don't know. I've been through hell and back throughout this entire adventure. So I'm surprised that I've made it this far. Surprised that it's here. What the outcome of it will be, I don't know. I wish that people appreciate it enough so that I can get them through the stretch goals, because I have about 2.5 more years of production planned ahead of books that I would to do to finish the entire arc. If I can motivate people to be excited about it and off the preview materials that we're giving away for free, feel this is something worth investing into, I'd love to just finish the story. That's the number one goal here. Just bring it all the way to the end. Tell a grandiose epic, start to finish, through multiple different entry points of media, all directed by one person.
I've looked into what you've done, and I've obviously seen the volume that you've somehow managed to get through to get to this point. And also, one of the things that I am intrigued about is it's a family affair. So, working with your partner as well in amongst it all. How's that been from a personal perspective?
My wife is not into IPs at all. We've split pretty much. We've split 2 years ago. We split the responsibilities of the company. She took over the outsourcing part, and I just kept on over focusing on the IP part. I wanted to take our IP development department serious for a very long time, and I've always felt I'm not really giving it the attention that I'm supposed to give it, because I'm always working half time on the outsourcing side and then half time on all the creator owned stuff, and we just had to separate. And she's the complete opposite of me. She's just not a risk taker at all. She thinks what I'm doing is completely bonkers. She thinks it's a fucking waste of money and time and I should get back to work. She's kind of semi-mad at me that I'm, wasting all these years on something that I cannot predict will be successful or not. And she would have never done it. And so there is a little bit of conflict in the air, but at the same time, I know deep down she still supports what I'm doing and she loves what I'm doing. So, she's also torn in how she should respond to it. The best way is not to have things interfere with one another.
The thing is, though, like you could, and I'm sure you have this conversation with your wife because I have it with mine, is you could always do the working for others and going through the motions and doing great work, but ultimately you're missing that kind of, you're missing the reward. You want to search. Well, most of the stuff that I've experienced, anyways, that's meaningful, come because I'm passionate about it, and I really want to follow that pathway. It's not about monetary goal and gain at that stage. It's about actually getting something out that you feel creatively really means something, because I think that if you can connect that meaning, it builds deeper connection with the people that experience that content by the time it comes out. And you can see content that's been pushed out for the sake of it versus content, No Good Country for Old Men, that you just mentioned earlier. Or even there's a Christopher Nolan thing about, it took, was it 10 years for Inception to come out? You toyed and fro with it for a little while, and then eventually it came. Real things take time and they take the sweat and the grind, and ultimately I think that's when the true rewards come, because it's more than just money. It's about meaning.
It's absolutely more. I mean, I would be in a much better place not doing the IP stuff because I'm paying everything out of pocket and I'm not making any money at the moment. So it's double whammy for me. I'm not servicing clients and I'm wasting all this extra cash on marketing, on producing a video game, on printing costs and all this other stuff I don't need to do, but I feel I want to do. I really, this is what it comes down to. You sometimes have to have this inner drive, this inner thing that just gets you going and pushes you towards the finishing line. And the volume has been insane, but at the same time, I feel this is my only chance to really shine as an artist and showcase what I've learned over 30 years of being in an active career, rather than always just selling 10% of myself to a client, because they're never going to get more out of me than what they're asking for at that moment in time. And it's always transactionary. You can never, I mean, you can, of course, do a super good job every time that you're being hired, but at the same time, they only get one aspect of you which they hired, and never the full package. And the full package can only exist if you're doing it yourself.
Yeah, definitely. So firstly, how can people kind of connect with the various different projects? Where do people go for the Kickstarter? Where do people go to reach out to you? I know that you've got various different channels, from websites to Kickstarter to Discord.
The video game's coming out as it's not a full video game, it's a prototype of the video game that we've been building, coming out as a free demo on Steam. So you can either wishlist it on Steam and then you get a notification when it's out on the 26th, or you can basically find the link over from the Kickstarter page to the Steam page and then go play it. The idea is to allow people to go and experience the world for 30 minutes in the free demo, see if they like it, soak up the mood, soak up the beginning of the story. It ends on a cliffhanger. The cliffhanger leads you right back into the Kickstarter campaign, where you can see that there is a whole universe of books that have already been done. Those books are available for purchase. I pushed pretty much very hard to get the first 6 books as print ready as I can, so that once the campaign gets funded, we can actually put all of this into production. If the campaign starts performing well and the books become profitable, we're making cash that we can then substitute back into the video game development and keep on building there, which keeps us independent and away from all these sharky investor talks that, demand 10x on your returns, or I want you to build up to vertical slice out of pocket. All these very big obstacles that are now happening in the industry, which make it really hard for independent developers, us, to get into any type of funding scenario that is meaningful for us to move forward. And so we need to do it ourselves, and we need to build an economy that works internally based off of the lines of products that we have set up for production of the bigger thing to continue.
And finally, just 2 quick questions, because I think it's important to capture this. The first part is, what's your view in regards to the overarching future of storytelling and also independent IP right now? And where do you think it's heading? Why? I think obviously we've touched upon a lot of it during this conversation so far. And then lastly, what would your closing thought, key takeaway be that you'd like to leave with our audience?
I mean, where's storytelling, independent storytelling headed? I think it's never been more easy to make things, and it's never been easier to build audience in terms of, finding that small group of people that will be your grassroots movement. And that's really the people that you need to focus on. What's much harder to do nowadays is, dropping something on the internet and just hoping for it to go viral, because it never happens anymore. Nobody is capable of breaking the wall of white noise that is out there. It's absolutely, those days are over. So you need to really refocus your approach as an independent storyteller, which is find the first key 100 people, that are attracted to your work, and nurture them and kind of build a community off of them. And then, start using them as your ambassadors, as your first outlet, as your missionaries, to bring more people in, to expose more people to what you're building. And you got to take that process is a slow process. It's a slow cooker process, but it builds a fandom that is incredibly authentic and is very close to the creator, and that will also, service the early steps of development, at least in terms of germination and allowing a product to feel real, because it already has readers, it already has consumers, it already has people that are attached to it. And that builds confidence. And out of that confidence, you can start then, creating bigger things. But I do think that if anything, we're in a situation where a lot more independent storytelling can happen pretty much overnight and really blow up if it's done right.
It's honestly, it's incredible what you've managed to achieve so far, but I do get the feeling it's just the beginning. And I think that where you're heading, yeah, strongly, anybody that's like tuning into this, I'll make sure that all the relevant links are put in the show notes or in the comments in the YouTube description and everywhere else you can possibly imagine. And yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. I wish you the best of luck, and yeah, I look forward to keeping in touch.
Thanks so much, Peter. I hope to see you again.